on. Just had a little hitch in my giddy up today, but just waiting for Joe to join me, which was kind of my fault. I'm going to do a little cutting and pasting here. Cutting and pasting. All right. And okay, little this. Everything's working today. It's amazing. I shouldn't say that, but it's true. And sometimes it doesn't work. All right. we're happening. Those are saved. Yep. All right. So we're waiting for JOE DIMINO. He'll be on shortly. In the meantime, oh, here we are. And here is Joe coming on. Okay. Here we go. Let me stop wherever I'm playing that music.
There we go.
Hey,
Cathy, what's up?
hold on. I had some music playing on in the background. How you
Yeah,
doing, man?
everything's good. How's life?
Very interesting,
Yeah, it's weird. Like this new year and just all of it's like, what's going on?
right? Just so you know, we are on right now. But
Okay.
it's true. That's what I feel like. I feel I feel good. I feel joyful, and then and then my reality kind of like it's like a swing, a
Yeah.
pendulum, and it goes over here to like wondering and dark and like wondering what's going on and what's happening with that. Then I go back to joy.
Yep. I
Luckily, I
know.
have the joy to go back to.
Yeah, that's it. That's the bottom line. Just as long as there's enough light and joy going on. But it's just I don't know. It almost seems as though psychologically speaking, it's kind of the effects of living through that pandemic where, you know, we shut down and I know LA was different, but then it was like, oh, well, we can come back out. And then there was a variant. I think there's a level of that psychology that we're just still too close to. And plus everything else that's going on is just adding to it. So you in LA proper?
I am.
Okay, so how have these fires affected you?
Well, I'm not directly for
Yeah.
my house but I have at least 15 friends who have lost everything. And then just in general, you can't help but pick up the mood and what's going on. And also you just feel bad
Yeah.
for so many people, especially Pa Pa Pacific Palisades and Altadena were two incredible communities,
Yeah.
old and uh, very community based. Altadena, of course, had a lot of maybe middle class to lower income, mostly, but some upper income musician communities. Pacific Palisades has more, a little, most of it has more of the upper, the higher financial, people in it,
Yeah.
but still a lot of musicians and just yeah, I happened to be in New York
Yeah.
when the fire started. I was at the Jazz Congress, and the Jazz Congress was half joyful and half in shock and
Yeah.
just going through observing it at a distance.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really there's a lot of fundraisers going on, a lot of
Yeah.
action. I feel I'm really proud of this community because I mean the community of LA because people are really reaching out to help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I listen to Cage Jazz quite a bit, and I hear there's a lot of spots on there where they're talking about donating and having
Yeah.
benefits. So that's good. That's definitely
Yeah,
good.
it's tons of stuff.
Yeah.
I've also been collecting some instruments for people,
Good.
kind of representing the California Jazz Foundation, which is a foundation here that actually is designed to help financially Los Angeles jazz musicians.
Sure.
So that's kind of, it's right up their alley, and everybody's pitching in. It's really,
That's good. That's excellent.
yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
Excellent. Well, it's great to reconvene.
Yeah. So I was on Joe's show several times, and he has a really great, comfortable, beautiful podcast. And we had so much fun last time talking. I said, "Well, you should be on my show."
Yeah, totally.
Now I have to say, man, your bio is short.
Yeah, I need to beef it up a little bit, probably.
Well, it's short.
Yeah.
And I tried to dig up stuff on you. I tried to dig
Wow.
up pictures on you, like how you look right now.
Yeah,
Nope, I didn't.
really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll have to do something about that. Yeah, okay. I'll come up with some I just thought there was more out there. Okay, I'll have to figure something out. Yeah. Um I don't know of being involved in any kind of uh informant kind of thing or anything that that snarf that out, but we'll have to look into it.
Yeah. So, um, but anyway, yeah, so like, what I came up with, let's see what I came up with. I came up with, um, okay, so here, you know, it was short. It's like, has been writing and creating in a variety of capacities since his college days at U of Missouri, Kansas City, somewhere around 1993. If you're if you're keeping score, that'd be about 29 years. And it all began at UMKCs University News as a sport writer and turned into a myriad of expressive avenues. Inventing poems, art, video, and audio has always been the proverbial cards. And then I added on, he holds court for the podcast interviews of Neon Jazz.
Yeah.
And the picture I got was a cool picture. You interviewing a trumpet player, looks like in a studio.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was nice, but that was all the bio that I got on you.
Okay.
So anyway, so here we are.
Yes, we are here. Yeah. And I can
We
fill in the
are.
gaps of that. I'd be more than happy to fill anything in there. So,
Okay, well, first let's just talk about that we met through Neon Jazz. Let's just talk about Neon Jazz. We'll go backwards. But so tell me about Neon Jazz, like, and you have told me about this before, but being your interview, I want to hear
sure.
it, now. So when did it start? Why did it start? Yeah.
Yeah. So I began this show back in 2011. And so I'm going to backtrack. I'm going to go back to the part of
Okay.
my bio at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. I really wanted to be on the set of Sports Center. I really wanted to be in high-end sports broadcasting. And I went to school for it. And I was a sports writer. I got into the whole scene. And I was doing pre and post game production work for the Kansas City Royals, and I really got involved with it, and I
Yeah.
loved it. And it was great, and interviewing athletes and doing that whole thing. And I just got to a point where I hit this crossroads in my life where I had been around the sports scene long enough, and I just was like, I don't know that I want to do this. I
Yeah.
don't know that I want to spend my life running after the coattails of highly paid athletes and a lot of canned responses. Lots of interviews with athletes were not dynamic, just things that my soul wasn't feeling. So
Yeah.
I exited out and graduated from college and just kind of went out into the world and tried to figure it out. Started out doing graphic design for a home health and hospice consulting firm, and then from there I did database design for a large architectural engineering firm, and
Uh-huh.
then finally made my way to running some labs for the YMCA and was kind of figuring things out. So I kind of started getting into IT. And my day job right now is I'm an IT technician for a school district in the Kansas City Metro. So I've always had technology as a basis, but going back to 2011, I was I went to a thrift store and I bought this raccoon, stuffed raccoon with the radio in it, the Radio Shack raccoon. And I turn it on, and there's this show called The Neon Beat, and I hear the song Kansas City, and I'm like, oh my God! And I'm listening to it, and the host is wonderful. So I reach out, and I'm like, I love this show, and my
Wow.
host
Okay.
is
Yeah.
wonderful. So I was doing part-time journalism at that time. So I
Yeah.
said, can I write an article on you? And his name was John Christopher, and he had a show called The Neon Beat. So we interview, and after the interview, he said, let's get a cup of coffee. So we get a cup of coffee, and he was like, you realize I live like 3 blocks away from you, and I have a full studio in my basement. He was an engineer by day for Entercom. So we had all this old equipment. He said, why don't you come over and write a script? So I was like, huh, I didn't even think about it. So I wrote a script, and it was jazz. And I went in there and we would meet up every week, and it turned into kind of this fun, creative, blank canvas we filled with radio. It was therapeutic. We became best friends. And now, almost 14 years later, we've been doing it. And when I started doing it, I really wanted to interview the musicians. There's nothing more unique in the world of music to me than jazz musicians, and having them tell the story of this very unique art form. I really wanted them to do it, and it just took off from there, and that was it. That was the birth, the nexus of this uh, project that's turned into Neon Jazz.
So great.
I love it. It's like, and I had no idea going into this that I was going to run into the finest human beings on the planet. And I know this could be debatable, but I really genuinely, I just believe that jazz musicians in this community is really a wondrous community. And the higher up you go the food chain, the
Yeah.
nicer. I mean, it's like the kindest people in the world, and they're willing to pass that torch on to the younger generations. And they're just wonderful storytellers, and they have so much to give. And for a lot of the jazz community, it's not like they're walking into a lucrative world.
Yeah.
Most of the jazz musicians are walking into this art form because they feel it. And
Yeah.
we don't have a lot of time on this planet. So for me, being a creative person, to be around that spirit that shines with this notion of wanting to create no matter what, it's just such a wonderful evolution of artistry that's I've just been grateful to be able to be a part of for a little while.
You see people listening. You see why I wanted to have him on because he's so eloquent and impressed with what I think is, extremely valuable, and a lot of other people. I mean, when you speak of, the higher up the food chain, and I think part of the reason, well, I was destined to be involved with jazz people, but part of my attraction along the years was with the elders. I remember one of the first concerts I went to was modern jazz quartet. My dad was a sax player anyway, but the first concert that I chose to go to myself with my sister was the Modern Jazz Quartet in Boston at the Jazz Workshop, which was downtown in Boston. There was Paul's Mall and the Jazz Workshop. They were owned by the same people, and they were right next to each other, like literally in the same basement. And we sat in the front row. Not only was the music absolutely elegant,
Oh yeah.
but the way that they communicated to just their presence, and they were all dressed really well. They communicated with each other to the audience. I was, I mean, if you get that, if you really see it and
Yeah.
experience it, doesn't matter how old you are, you have been changed,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so, Yeah, I mean, over the years, so many people like that, like especially the elders,
Yeah,
Hank Jones. Oh my God.
yeah,
I mean, I could go on and on. But, and now when you were saying that, I immediately thought of somebody who right now is going through the fire experience, and John Clayton. Talk
yeah.
about kind.
Oh, wow, yeah.
He's like the kindest man ever.
Ever.
Yeah,
John's wonderful.
yeah.
Absolutely wonderful.
And his
But
son is great. He's
yes,
passed that along down and so on. But yeah, it's and I'm sure there are other genres with people who are eloquent and
sure.
warm and passing on. But as a general rule, I
Yeah.
think this is what jazz represents, actually.
Yeah.
It's so much.
And that's why it's so different. And I'm not trying to come down on sports journalism, but it's so vastly different from that world. I think the athletes get used to getting asked the same things,
Yeah.
combative bait questions, but the thing I'm a journalist that wants to have just a good conversation. I don't want to bait. I don't want sound clips. I'm not looking to capitalize on someone falling into an accidental hole. I just want to celebrate this art form. And like I remember Randy Weston. It was one of the early interviews with the legend where I just came away and I was vibrating at a different frequency. I just
Mhm.
couldn't believe how wonderful he was. And I remember at one point, he had talked about all these pilgrimages to Africa.
Yeah.
And I'd spent all this time listening to this art form and getting into it. And at one point he said, "You know what, Joe? The continent of Africa swings. The elephant tail swings. The palms on the trees swing. Everything in that world swings." And I was just like, "Oh my God." Like this big, huge curtain just parted. And I was like, he just explained the absolute beginnings of why this music swings. And when it came over to America and how these brilliant musicians amalgamized together. And I always think about the musicians like Sonny and Dr. Lonnie Smith and all these guys. They remind me of the Swamis in Cloud City and Empire Strikes Back. They're these Jedis with these extreme levels of chloride or that are just looking down on us, and they vibrate at a different level. They almost remind me of like deities on this planet. There's a kindness, there's a benevolence. It's like John Coltrane making a love supreme. There's something that transcends this reality, and they transmute it thankfully to us to feel this. But what they're giving is absolute love on a level that I think we all want to find out and attain to, and we can find it through this art form, thankfully, and stitch and piece together why we are on this planet, the meaning of life. A lot of it is interwoven into this music that they're giving us. Sorry, I just threw the whole piano out of the. I threw the piano off the 30th floor of the building, and it just crashed.
I'm like, again, I'm like, yeah, you said it. So, but I mean, to hear that come out of somebody's mouth is great. And it's not like I don't talk about it, but it's just great. You put it so incredibly beautifully.
Thank you.
Of course, I couldn't agree more. And it makes me actually want to cry, especially right now, like how I came on and I said, it's kind of a mixture of pleasure and pain that I'm
Yeah.
living in right now. And it makes me want to weep because when I do look at the pain part, I don't have to make the list up of what exists in the pain part. It's for all of us.
Yeah.
And it's just every day you're hit with it, in some form or another. It's either personal or it's a little bit of a distance or it's a friend or it's a commercial on TV. It's just like it's so not what life is supposed to be about.
Yeah.
And this side, the joy side, is what you just explained. And this this is actually life.
Yeah.
This, you know, God, I was just having a great conversation. You ought to talk to this guy sometime, John Fitzgerald.
Okay.
So John Fitzgerald is a percussionist, and he works or worked I think he still does, worked for Yamaha
Yeah.
and has done drum circles for years. And he's very spiritually inclined. He's a guy who will come to the drum circle and think of these exercises that bring people to awareness and
Yeah.
also together.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's fascinating talking to him. He
Sure.
said he read this book, which has quite a name, and I can't remember what it is. I just saw him yesterday, but still, the name of the book is long. Where he said that, and I don't know if it's going to come across as it hit me, but when he said it, I wanted to cry again.
Yeah.
He said, "Jazz is not the notes being played, the lines being played or the notes. It's actually the space in between those notes."
Yeah.
And that hit me, and I also was crying because that's what you're describing. You're describing this space here, this relationship. It can't be happening without a relationship.
Yeah.
And the space is it's gorgeous. It's the God presence. It's a balance. It changes and grows, and sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, and it's continuous, and it's in the moment, and it's moving. I mean, there's so many things that you could describe, and but that is again, it makes me feel like crying, and that's what jazz truly is. It brings you into that space, and not only can you experience it, but you can share it.
Yeah.
And if people listen, they're open to it, they can get so much. But then, of course, there's the frustration of trying to explain that to people or trying to get people out to hear it, to
Yeah.
experience it. And it can be disheartening. It
Yeah.
can be really disheartening. And here we are, the jazz people. We're as you said, it's not for money that we're doing it
Uh,
particularly. Okay, if we get money, I mean, it's great. We have to live, but that's not our driving purpose.
yeah.
You know. So yeah, it's it's quite the thing. Monday night. Have you ever heard of the World Stage?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was Billy Higgins, the drummer, his creation years
Yeah.
ago. And
Yeah.
it's been there all then, long
Yeah.
time ago. And so anyway, Monday night, the great pianist Eric Reed
Yeah.
created a fundraiser. It had, I don't know how many groups. Every song was a different group.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. It went on for like 2.5 hours
Yeah.
and ended with the singer Dwight Tribble and Eric Reed doing song,
Yeah. Yeah.
Lord, sweet Lord above, and a do dee 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 dee. And Dwight in his crazy way was it was almost like someone was sitting on the edge of the bed crying in prayer to
Yeah.
God. And
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I not only me, a lot of people were weeping and by the end. And after the whole thing was over, as you said, it was like the space was buzzing.
Yeah.
It was tangible,
Yeah.
and that was what was created. I mean, how can you compare that with anything?
I
It's
know.
hard. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I really thought during the pandemic there would be this kind of um we would kind of step back into the aggro feeling, that honey warm analog of jazz, and that people would rediscover the original music.
Yeah.
And I did have a moment like that at one point. Bobby Watson was having a show. We're thankful here in Kansas City that Bobby Watson enriches this community so much with his legendary status, which I don't think Kansas City understands what kind of league he's in and how fortunate we are to have him. Not only playing here, but all of the musicians that he's taught throughout the years at UMKC. But anyway, there was this thing called Plexpod shows, and it was all, we would all park and be 6 feet apart and raise the back of the cars and watch the shows. And at one point, I had a Downbeat shirt on. And I'm walking up to the concession stands, and this guy that would probably most people in the country would think is like a prototype of a Kansas City, and he just looked like he was probably into country music and not really into jazz. And he just kind of looked over and said, "Downbeat, what's a downbeat?" And I was like, I was trying to gauge if he was joking with me, and I was like, "It's a magazine. It's kind of the jazz Bible." And he was like, "Oh, cool." And then I can't remember what he said after that, but I just started talking about having a radio show and getting into it. And then his daughter comes up and she's 13. And he was like, I just started listening to jazz over the pandemic. We found a station out of Kansas and we loved it so much and found out about the show. We had to come see it. But it was that notion that I was hoping would multiply, that
Yeah.
people would just find out about this art form, find out about this music, because it gets kind of thrown into this highbrow kind of a thing. But if people really absorbed it, for the complexities of it, the feeling that it gives you is this simplicity, this just good feeling of like we've talked about, walking into something that just
Yeah.
feels good. And
Yeah.
that's the way I wish it was translated more or less, because that's what it is to me.
Yeah. Sorry, you're inspiring me.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
I'm
No.
writing down something.
Yeah.
Who knows where it will go. Um,
I love
yeah.
it.
Yeah. And what I was writing down is actually along with my frustration and desire with marketing. You know, so as part of my actions is getting it out
Yeah.
and curating series or venues or whatever. And so marketing, I just feel frustrated because I feel like there's a secret about marketing that I don't know.
I get
And
it.
everybody says, "Oh, yeah, get on social media and blah blah blah." And it's like, yeah, well, I can do that, and I do it, but that's not what I'm talking about. It's like, for instance, I'm at this moment in time, I am starting to formulate a plan on how to help market the Angel City Jazz Festival,
Yeah.
which is a festival that's 16 or 17 years old, put on by Rocco Samazi, who actually before the club Vibrato had his restaurant Rocco's there and years ago, and that was the only place in LA that had modern jazz at the time.
Yeah.
And so this festival is about creative music. Some of it's the terms are a little crossover.
Yeah.
Avant-garde, creative music is a little more tolerable for people.
Yeah.
Improvised music. And
Yeah.
these people are not just hacks who he has. I mean, they are experienced improvisers. And when you go, you can't believe that people haven't played together before.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, they're creating these solid pieces of music that are effective. So anyway, I just really wanted to help him promote it more because I'm a big fan of it, but I don't even hear about it.
Right. Right.
So it's like, so I was thinking of creating a survey for people and just like a ground, what is it called? Ground roots? No, something roots,
Like a
right?
grassroots kind of a thing.
Grassroots, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
not enough
yeah.
coffee.
Oh, it's all good.
Grassroots. And actually, like asking three people to
Uh-huh.
fill out this survey and then having them ask three people and so
Yeah.
on. And just questions, what kind of music do you like? Where do you go? How do you find out? Would you consider listening to improvised music? Have you checked this out? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So marketing and promotion, I feel like needs more attention. So
Yeah.
I just wrote down jazz as a feeling, which is a real simple statement. But I think that simple statements like that might be a good way to promote what I'm trying to promote,
Yeah.
so that anybody, would hear something like that and say, well, what does that mean? Or, oh, okay, let me check that out. Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
That
totally.
kind of little statement and idea. Um, During the pandemic, I actually made these. No, these didn't go over. I didn't sell them very well, but
Yeah,
these little stickers, right?
yeah,
So one is let the heart have its way, and all it takes is one human,
yeah.
and launch rockets of desire, which I stole. Art
Oh,
is the tie that unites the planet.
yeah,
Anyway, but these didn't go over very well because why? Because marketing. But
yeah. Right.
you
Yeah,
know, you can
yeah,
put these out anywhere. So anyway, that's what I was writing down from what you said. Just like
yeah.
a little simple idea that that falls into what I'm thinking.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, which is what it is. And I wish that, and you are right. You're getting into territory. I know even in Kansas City, we have a jazz reviewer that talks about how he'll review albums at the end of the year. And Kansas City musicians aren't typically on the higher echelons of that. And it's all about getting it out there and promoting. And there's a lot of wonderful radio promoters. I mean, I get CDs all the time in the mail. And again, when I say the jazz community, it's not just the musicians, it's everybody around it that's insulating and that's promoting. And they're wonderful. And it's like, I think it's kind of a part of what you're saying. I wish that jazz was more of a mainstream art form that people would gravitate to. For instance, in Kansas City, we don't have a full-time jazz station here. I mean, you can go to other places,
Unbelievable.
K Jazz, KCSM out in California. I mean, Seattle has a 24. Like, I still can't believe it. They almost had one going here that is kind of parsed out into different genres. It's not all jazz, but it's like, how can that not happen in Kansas City?
I know.
It's weird. So,
That is weird.
yeah, yeah.
Hey,
So,
I have some questions here actually.
please, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
People are saying hi, Mark Baldrich and Roland. Yeah, I know. I hope people are having an easier time finding us now, Roland. Taylor Hatch, he said, "Great to meet you, and your show is excellent."
Thank you.
And let's see. Here's one question. As you've collected so many interviews and performances, which show that you've done was the most memorable to you and why? I think we talked about that.
The one that almost there's moments that will choke me up. David Lynch passing really choked me up. I did a memorial to him, and he transcends all levels of genre. He was such a wonderful creative spirit that we were all lucky to dip our toes into for a little while. But I remember the one show that got me the most was the last show of 2020. The
Yeah,
year we all walked into, I didn't miss a week and I went to shows and I still pushed through and there was so many magnanimous moments that went into that. The last thing that I saw that year, well, the last jazz moment I had, I went to a book signing that Maxine Gordon had, and
yeah.
she put the date on top. She was promoting Dexter's book, and she put the date on it, and I never forgot that. It was March 13th, 2020. And I got to
Ah.
interview her later and said, I will cherish that forever. I have it framed on my wall too. I was like, because of that, she puts the date on all of her autographs now.
Oh, wow.
But I remember seeing Bill Frisell about probably March 3rd. And I remember at one point he was with the trio. Petra Hayden was with him. And my wife, we got married in 2019. We had been together for a few years. So she was getting used to jazz. And when we walked in, she's like, what's this show going to be like? And I'm like, with Bill Frisell, I have no idea. I just don't know what's going to happen. But we're doing the show. And at one point, I think we had our first COVID case in Kansas at that point. And she, at one point, started singing We Shall Overcome. And everybody in the crowd started standing up and everybody started swaying. And it was like cattle in a pasture. We knew the tornado was coming. We didn't know everything was going to shut down, but we knew the earth was going through this. And the reason why I bring that up is there was all of those moments through that year. And when I finally did my December show and thought about everything we went through, I did interviews in the cars with my kids, and I never did it before. And the timbre and the strength that came out of those voices of all of those people was overwhelmingly positive. So the experience of going through such a tragic thing with all these musicians with projects that stopped, all of these shows that melted away, the jazz community still came through. And it was therapeutic and psychologically beneficial for my kids that weren't in school, that had very low social and emotional outlets. My son's on the spectrum, and it was just so hopeful. And to this day, my stepdaughter Jilly still talks about that. She'll talk about Theo Hill moving from New York to Costa Rica and hearing the macaws in the background, and him talking about his new career in surfing and hearing the surf in the background, and other musicians in France and around the world that just all of them were hopeful. And that show really choked me up. It was hard to get through it because I was playing clips. I mean, it's getting me right now thinking about it because it was just what a triumphant way of celebrating our lives on this planet and not stopping. And that's what jazz was emblematic of. We're not, this is what our lives are, and we're going to do it no matter what. And they did. And
Yeah.
to celebrate and to be a part of interviewing, and there was all of these cats that were in these buildings in Brooklyn where people were tired of them playing their instruments, but they were still being hopeful, and
Yeah.
everybody was still pushing through, and we got through it. And now that I get to interview those same musicians again, we made it through. They're performing, their music, it's vibrant, it's emblematic of that time. So anyway, that was a long answer, but that was quite a show for me.
Beautiful. Let's see. What are your, Taylor has a lot of great questions. What are your absolute favorite questions to ask your guests on your show? Do you have one?
The one question that always gets everybody and is everyone has a perception of who you are, your family, your friends, everyone you work with,
Yeah.
all of the people that listen to your music, but who do you think you are? And sometimes it can sound like a mob guy. Who do you think you are? And with some of these people that are really high up on the food chain, sometimes they're just like, what I've no one's ever said that. They're just like fluxing, like no one's ever asked me that before. My own kids, my wife. And it's like, well, let's do it. What do you got? Who are you? And it's kind of entering therapy realm. And it gets to it. And I think the bigger subtext of that is that I'm not a musician. I mean, I can play the drums a little bit, but I don't have a musician brain.
Yeah.
I come from a place where I just want to get into the psychology and celebrate that visceral feeling that all of us feel from this music and have the musician transmute that feeling to us. Like,
Yeah.
what is it that makes you tick? And I'll get all kinds of vignettes. And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. I think in my interviews, there are similar themes, of course, because it's a reflection of me too,
Yeah,
right? Of
sure.
what I'm interested in talking about and stuff. But one thing that always intrigues me is that there's a lot of musicians that end up talking about, because it's like it's curious how people got to where
Yeah.
they are.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people said, I made myself get up and get out of the house and go to the club. And like, I think we spoke about this, David Amram, when he was younger and he was playing French horn. He wasn't totally involved in the jazz field yet, but he was involved. And he went to see Charlie Parker, and they were sitting on a break talking, and Mingus came by, and Charlie Parker introduced David, and he said, he plays great French horn. You should do something with him. And Mingus said, do you want to go on the road to Europe? And that was, so if Amram hadn't come out, that never would have happened. So
Absolutely.
a lot of these, a lot of musicians have said things like that. I I went out. You know, I was
Yep.
there. Somebody saw me and said something, and so which actually is relates to what you were saying. This continuance, this going on, moving forward, no matter what. It's kind of you have to have. I don't know if you have to have faith, but that's kind of what it's about.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, yeah, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to put on my pants and get up, and
Yeah.
that's faith. You
Yeah.
know.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I remember Chris Brubeck, and this was at the end of the pandemic year,
Yeah,
had some lost recordings, tapes of the timeout session, and we were talking about it. And it's the little moments that I'll never forget, where at
yeah,
one point he said, the kids, the Brubeck kids, used to go on tour and help him carry his equipment
yeah.
because he got into a diving accident, I believe on his honeymoon or somewhere when he was younger, and he broke his back. So he always had back problems. And it's
Huh,
just those little things that humanize these legends, these titans. Like when the
yeah,
Miles Davis movie came out, we got to see him as a man, and we
yeah,
got to understand the music a little bit better. It's like all of those little moments um, just absolutely floor me, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. Um, let's see. Here we go. Here's another good one. The connection of jazz and journalism is unique, as it's all about collecting the ongoing history and transitions of the music. Are you finding something interesting about jazz that you haven't discovered until interviewing a guest on your show?
Yeah, the one thing, the big realization that I realized about interviewing jazz musicians is that there's a lot of times where I'll look at life, whether a bird lands in a particular place and flies off in a way, I realize the temporal improvisation that exists in this world that reminds me of what jazz musicians do. They compound that notion that every single thing we do is going to happen once in that one particular unique way. No matter how many times any pop band will climb on stage, there will be little variances here and there. But I think more than anything else, the jazz community, the musicians that climb on that stage are very cognizant in a certain amount of ways that they're going to do something once. And there's a good chance that it's going to be magical. I remember being at the Blue Room off 18 and Vine, and Phil DeGreg was there
Oh,
with
wow.
his and,
Yeah,
and he was there with his band,
yeah.
and there was a big storm whipping up outside, and we're all watching it, and everything's bending and rain and then all of a sudden the lights went out. And the only thing that was going was the acoustic pieces of the set. And they kept going. And they played through it. And everybody's looking around. And Greg's hammering the key, the piano, and it's all of a sudden acoustic. The bass is acoustic. The drums aren't mic'd anymore. And it was magical. And it's those moments where Mother Nature says, you know what, we're taking improv to a whole other level. So in a very more Cliff Note way, it's just that nature of life is improv. Jazz is a reflection of this walk that we all do as human beings. No matter how big or small or whoever you are, we're all down here just collecting all of these moments and memories, and jazz musicians embody that.
Yeah, yeah. I was just kind of contemplating on how it feels, when you get up first and you're kind of eager to experience those moments.
Yeah,
Those it's really about the now,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, I remember let's see, who was it? God, trying to remember exactly the situation. Maybe it was meditative. I might have been speaking about meditation to somebody like a teacher, and they said, "Well, you're a jazz singer, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, you already do it." And I said, "Oh, oh yeah, right."
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I mean that's again. I was talking with my friend John Fitzgerald yesterday, and we were talking about if you're aware that the challenge is to be in the moment
right.
continually,
Yeah,
consistently. I mean, because, you get up to perform and all these various things can happen. And I mean, that's what Kenny Werner talks about in his whole effortless mastery program at Berkeley and his book. And, that's what it is. It's being
yeah,
in the moment and how to continuously be there.
yeah.
And then when you can when you can do that, it's mastery
Yeah,
actually. And
it
it's
totally is.
effortless. Yeah. It
Yeah,
doesn't mean you're not gonna fall out of it for a second,
sure.
but still, I like to talk about it with my students as the aesthetic universe.
Yeah,
And and so I used to say that, there's the door to the aesthetic universe. You have to grab the
yeah,
grab it, open it up, and step in.
Yeah.
once you're inside, you you can't think to yourself, oh, that note sucked. You
Right.
can't, because that'll take you out of the room.
Yeah.
You just have to be in the room with what's going on, and that's it.
Yeah.
And therefore, no mistakes happen, because a mistake is just a possibility, and it's going to be treated as such.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see. Mark is asking, why do you think people are not connecting with jazz?
I I think there's a level of it that's gotten some weird press. Like you'll hear sometimes people say, "Well, it's difficult," or "I don't know how to start. I don't know how to get into it." I'll hear people say that a lot. I just don't even know where to begin with it, or maybe they think it's a little bit too highbrow. I think it's been stereotyped into something that it's not. But I hear from musicians all the time, one of the best compliments that they can get is when they get off stage, somebody will come up and say, "I never even listened to jazz and I'm hooked now." Like
Yeah,
I'm downloading music right now as we speak, and they're totally into it. I just think that there is a perception of it, which is why I was hoping during the pandemic it would change. But I think that it's just a slow thing. I think people are going to figure it out. I think they're going to get into it. Like for instance, with me, I have kids at home that now totally love jazz. Like even the other day, my son Miles, who's named for obvious reasons, he said to me, "Man, I just love jazz." Because I get all these CDs and I still have his CD player and I'll put it in and he loves it. And I have a radio station playing in his room all the time. It's his backdrop. So it's like people that are in a parental place can slowly spread that bubble out. That's the best marketing, is just taking that love as a parent or a relative or whatever and imbuing that into young minds. Because my wife was a fifth grade teacher for 25 years. She's in high school now, but she plays jazz to the kids all the time and they love it. Like there's, up tempo stuff like Chris Hazelton, the Hammond B3 organ player here in town.
yeah,
He has an album called the Boogaloo 7, and she'll play that, and the kids are just tapping their feet. Or, I mean, it can be Coltrane, it can be Monk, which Monk tends to send the young brain in tailspins. They're like, "Whoa, what's going on?" Because it's Monk. But they
yeah,
love it. They totally love it. And they're tapping to it. They're like, "What is this?" Because we aren't used to that. We're not baptized that in popular culture now. I mean,
yeah,
it's just kind of shoved into this subgenre. But if it can get pulled out into the light, I think most people would be like, "Yeah, I dig it."
yeah. I agree with that. I have a friend who's kind of a jazz humanitarian, she lives in Cyprus. She's from Cyprus,
Yeah.
and she's involved with the United Nations, and she does a lot. And she created this organization, and one of the things that they did was in schools, elementary schools and junior highs and such. So in between classes, the music that was being piped in was pop, and she changed that. She
Yeah.
actually could change that to jazz.
Cool.
I
That's
mean,
it.
yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the beginnings right there, you know,
Yeah.
for
I
sure.
have grandchildren, and I keep trying to imagine how to. Nobody's into jazz in my family, in my
Okay.
immediate family like that.
Yeah.
And so I keep trying to imagine how to, you know, turn them on to it. One of my grandchildren, I actually managed to impress a little by playing something in the car. And he was like, "Oh, wow, that sounds pretty good." And I said, "You know who that is?" And he said, "No." And I said, "That's Mima." And he said, he was like,
Yeah.
"You're on a record, or you're being, whoa, oh."
Yeah.
And then, but I was thinking of creating like a music night.
Yeah.
I've been talking about this for a long time, and getting together and everybody play a song that they
Uh-huh.
like.
Uh-huh.
So everybody gets to sit and listen to each other's music.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a really tiny little way to get in, but we all, I mean, basically, there's jokes about, yeah, oh, meme is jazz.
Yeah. Yep.
So anyway, at some point, maybe, when they get old enough, or if they've come across it, or I don't know. I'm not sure how to quite make that happen, at this kind of relationship.
Yeah, but the indelible seeds of it planted. I mean, one way or another, it's inescapable. They've experienced it, they feel it, and when they come to it, they'll come to it naturally.
Yeah, 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 yeah. right? And that absolutely too. Um, what? Let's see. Where was Banouche? I have a friend Banouche in England.
Yeah.
She loved she loves the question, "Who are you?" She said,
Yeah.
like the caterpillar in Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah. 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 Totally.
Let's see. Another Taylor question. Let's see. Okay. This could apply to jazz or anything, but what's been the most influential piece of advice that was given to you, and how did it influence you?
Oh, wow. I think the thing that's been one of the most influential things that it has made me understand not only the art form, but being alive on this planet. I'll ask musicians, why do they love jazz? Very simply put, and they can go anywhere. And they always say freedom. And then they'll explain that freedom. And the word freedom is synonymous, but the description of why they feel that freedom, I mean, from someone that comes here from another country, it means something different. So an Israeli pianist is going to say freedom and it's going to mean something different. Someone that comes here from Iran, but someone that just grew up in New York or Kansas City or Indianapolis, they all have this spin on it. And it may not specifically be advice, but it spins into advice of really like enjoying the freedom of being involved. For instance, I mean, I remember during the pandemic, there were some musicians that were like, God, if I could just get on stage one more time, I just want to get on stage. And I was always very cognizant pre-pandemic. I would get passes to cover shows, and every time before the show, I would just take it in. I'd be like, man, this is amazing. I'm just before the calm before everything was going to happen. So I think the advice, best advice I've gotten from all these musicians is to just grab on to where you're at right now and just dig it, just enjoy where it's going to go, and there's no script for where it's going to go. you know
Yeah.
it's one of those artistic realms where you don't, like, if you're going to Broadway to see a show, you have a general idea of what you're walking into. Now they're all going to have their spins, but if you're going to go to downtown Kansas City to see Miguel Zanon with musicians he's played with for 25 years, you have no idea how that's going to materialize. And I did see him a few years ago, and it blew me away. Like his playing and the guys that were in that band, it was unbelievably powerful. So I think in a long-winded way, it's all about grabbing that freedom of this art form and just enjoying it, whether it's in a conversation or whether it's music that's getting put into your brain through your ears. It's just that entirety of celebrating just being art. I think art's going to save us in the end, like this whole swing of feeling okay and then not okay. In between all of that is the gray matter, and I think art is going to save us. The capacity for humans to be able to create things out of nothing and make us feel emotions that we should feel as human beings in the right way is going to save our souls.
Yep, that's another well put thing, Joe. I'm going to listen to this interview afterwards, and I'm going to write down these particular
Okay, good.
comments that you make that I'm like, oh, I'm going to call them Joeisms, something like that.
You know what's funny about you saying that is that when
Yeah,
I re-listen to interviews that I do, I
yeah,
finally get it. It's like I hear and I'm listening when I'm doing interviews, but when you step away and feel it the second time, that's another revelation about interviews where I'm like, oh my God, that was crazy, profound. And I didn't get it the first time. But maybe that's just the nature of who we are as people. We have to, it's why we listen to music over and over again. It's why we can listen to A Love Supreme for the 9,000th time and finally be like, I got it. I got
yeah.
that bridge. I got that song. That's how it happens.
So true. Yeah, when I think, there was a moment in time where I was going to listen to every interview and write down the aha moments.
Yeah.
Well, that lasted a minute.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. And first of all, it's hours and hours. And,
Yeah.
you know, I, I mean, I remember a few that I really, sparked my interest, but there's been so many,
Yeah.
just like you. It's like, yeah, I mean, God, people are amazing to speak with.
They are. They totally are. And there's so many wonderful stories that exist out there. Like I still can't believe how many people have talked about stories about Maynard Ferguson. Like he was the master. Like all of these young cats that were with him were like, it was when you left the show and Maynard was on the bus, you would absolutely cry the whole time because his stories would put you in stitches. Just he was crazy good at what he did. So those are the
I have,
moments that are
yeah,
wonderful.
I have some connections with him. Actually, first of all, when I must have been 19, I guess, something like that. Anyway, I went on the road with the first and last girl trio, singing trio that I
Yeah,
ever did. I mean, I grew up with two sisters singing, but
yeah,
not like this. This was like in little, the little outfits, the two-piece outfits, and I am woman,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you are man. And so we went to Pittsburgh to the Harmer House, and which was a restaurant and showroom and a motel.
Wow.
So, we stayed in the motel and we were part of this show, a dinner show, it had comedians and,
Yeah.
dancers, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, in the middle of the gig, Maynard's band came to town and played there.
Wow.
So, and Maynard actually that night, his lips were totally screwed up. He couldn't play.
Wow.
And so that was, an interesting thing. I met a guy, Andy McIntosh, that night, or that period of days, who was a sax player who I later met in LA, re-met, and we dated and remained friends. And he, not too terribly long ago, I don't know how long ago, 12 years ago, something like that, he brought me to England and we made this record, Straight Ahead to the UK.
Yeah.
So so that was like a Maynard line. Then
Wow.
Maynard's daughter, it lives here, and she's married to Christian Jacob, the pianist who plays with Tierney Sutton and a bunch
Okay.
of people.
Yeah.
Anyway, so and so in fact, I interviewed them and talked a little bit about Maynard, and yeah, I mean Maynard Ferguson. Wow, that was like, and he was kind of a leader in taking young. Well, I mean everybody did, but he
Yeah.
took young players,
Yeah.
and there was an edge to that music. It
Yeah.
wasn't typical big band music. It was modern,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
edgy.
Yeah.
And that was how Andy McIntosh played. He played alto and he had this edgy kind of sound,
Yeah. Absolutely.
And yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it really interesting. I meant to say this, and I'll probably have to share this with you. But Pat Martino, I have a book of Pat Martino quotes,
Wow.
and they're really fun.
Yeah. That
I
is
might, I
cool.
might bring them up and just.
Yeah.
But you know who I saw a few weeks ago who blew my mind? I don't know if you've gotten a chance to see him live. Richard Bona,
I haven't, no.
the bass player, singer. He's
Yeah.
from Cameroon,
Yeah.
and he had a Cuban pianist and a Cuban drummer.
Yeah.
It was at the Jazz Bakery, which is an old uh, established event. I don't know what to call them now. They used to have a venue and then they lost that venue. So she's moved it around the city into different venues, still called the Jazz Bakery. Anyway, there's actually some footage on this thing, but the guy, he took the whole event, but he did not include the speaking in between, which to me was at least a third of the enjoyment.
Yeah.
Richard Bona was so gorgeous,
Yeah.
natural, funny.
Yeah.
I mean, he talked in African to a bunch of the people. I didn't care at all. I thought the whole thing was great,
Yeah.
and it was like being in somebody's living room with
Yeah.
them and just super intimate. He had dynamics, he can play the shit out of the bass,
Yeah.
but he would total dynamics.
Uh-huh.
And his singing was like an angel,
Yeah.
and the guys were great. I mean, it was one of the more incredible shows I've seen actually.
You know, Naduzo Makatiki, I believe that's how you pronounce
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I had him on the show.
He is unbelievable. And he had a Cuban drummer with him when he played at the Blue Room.
Yeah.
And I was at a kind of a press conference with him. He is absolutely one of the most, he reminds me of Matthew Whitaker. There is a purity to the light they spill into this world beyond their music that is impenetrable. And it always, people like that give me hope. Like, I interviewed Matthew Whitaker about a week and a half before he was on 60 Minutes. And I remember seeing a thing that came up on 60 Minutes, and I was like, wait, I just talked to him.
I don't
And
know who that is, by the way.
he's a blind pianist. He plays the Hammond B3. He was a prodigy. He hit the scene really, really, really young, and people were freaked out by how good he is. And he has just
Oh,
matured into this force. And he played at the Folly here in Kansas City. I think it was about a year ago.
yeah,
Mind blowing what he can do. He
yeah.
was channeling Stevie Wonder on stage. His whole vibe was just wonderful. And the way he was talking to the crowd and he was talking over the piano and you could just hear him just bam, bam, and talking to everybody. Yeah, just like getting into it and just had Stevie vibes to him. And it was just unbelievable just how kind he was. And Aduzo was the same way. He was just everything that came out of him was just positivity and it exuded from him. And it wasn't just being on stage, it was who they were. So those kinds of things just absolutely give me hope for every level of humanity.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
wonderful.
absolutely. Richard Bona, he actually came out immediately to the front,
Yeah.
after the show and was taking pictures and hugging people.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. That
I
kind of
mean,
thing's wonderful.
yeah, yeah, just
So cool.
gorgeous, gorgeous. Um, Roland says, do you think that it's that one particular element in jazz that a particular musician happens to have played that provides the personal portal for an individual to get into jazz? Good question.
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's kind of like the first notes on Kind of Blue. It just like there's a profundity that just whoosh, you're just in. Like, where's this gonna go? And it's just like one of my favorite songs, especially, and I keep coming back to that 2020 year is Peace Piece by Bill Evans. Just what a
Yeah,
magnificent
yeah,
wave of just auditory good that just washes over your brain and
yeah,
just kind of just what as Louis Armstrong said, washing away, or maybe Duke said it, washing away the residue, the dust of the day. It just has the way of, making everything real. But I
yeah,
think it can be. I think it can be a note. I think it can be just a very simple piece, and then you're in. You're totally sucked in.
yeah. I also, there's kind of guess there's not just one rule regarding this, but a big piece of it is eh, um, being in that aesthetic universe
Yeah.
and enjoying that and experiencing the aesthetic universe. And that way the audience can experience that. They're listening and watching you
Yeah.
experience that. And
Yeah.
that's how they can experience it too.
Yeah.
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 Uh,
There's definitely a transfer between
yeah.
audience and musician. I saw Warren Wolf about a month ago at the Blue Room.
Uh-huh.
And man, he was hitting those vibes like crazy. And I could just feel him feeding off the audience, just totally getting into it. Like
Yeah.
everything was just amped up. But yeah, that happens so many times. That energy transference, it's like the whole package. Because I mean, you can woodshed, you can do all that on your own. But when you get in front of human beings that are genuinely appreciating it and they're totally into it, there's just this gratitude that everybody has.
Yeah. I thought I would just read you a few um, here, I can even share the screen, but a few of Pat Martino's aphorisms, they're
Yeah,
called.
yeah,
So, so have a desire for interaction, be grateful in every moment, enjoy what you're doing no matter what it is, accept the now it's the only thing that's real, live in the
yeah,
moment, value action and activity, make creativity a top priority. have a deep interest in all the things you do. Truth cannot be protected or hidden. It is and always will be. Uh, This is from Pat Martino.
Yeah, that's
Change
totally cool.
occurs when man evaluates what hampers him. I love that. Thank you,
Yeah,
Pat.
yeah.
Define your intentions and refine them. The more one definition changes, the more refined one becomes. Extend definition and clarity in all things. Be objective and optimistic as is possible in all things. I think as it goes on, there's 8 pages. I'll send these to you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You know, open-mindedness, composition is the expression of life. Break all inhibitions by striving to place yourself in new musical environments filled with new colors and textures. Anyway, on and on. So, this Pat Martino thing, if any of you out there would like to have that, I do have a link to it in a doc. So I'd be happy to share that with you.
He was my 500th interview. I was just referencing my
Really?
yeah, I just looked it up. I interviewed him in 2018 because I remember how wonderful he was. And I was like, when did we talk? And I have it on there that he was my 500th that I did. So yeah, that's cool. That's
How
great.
many interviews have you done?
Oh man, overall, I mean, I'm up into the like 3,400 something like that. Now, there's a lot of I'm doing interviews with a lot of other different professionals and creatives around, but I would say in the world of jazz, at least 1,500 to 2,000 at this point. Yeah. So it's fun. I love it.
Let's see. Tanya Grubbs, who's a great singer on the East Coast. Matthew Whitaker is incredible. He music directed a new musical about Billy Strayhorn in is that Philly? He conducted, played, and I am still trying to figure out how he did all of that while there were cues and all the things going through his ear monitor.
She's wonderful. We just interviewed recently. I loved our interview. She's absolutely stellar. And I believe I talked to her about him, maybe. We kind of touch base on him because I'll
Yeah,
bring him up every once in a while. But yeah, what he does is uncanny. I mean, what he was doing at that show, because he had a Hammond B3 and then he had a piano and he was just oscillating between both of them. And it was just like, wow. And then he was leading the band and they were all blending in. It was crazy.
it's funny. I was just talking. I wonder if this has anything to do with it, but who was I talking to? Was it last night? Yeah, last night. Carol Baki Rita.
Yeah.
She is a really wonderful human, beautiful human, and she's a singer and a dancer, and she especially loves Brazilian.
Yeah.
And she has like mixed heritage background, Italian and something else, maybe Brazilian. And her father in the 60s was a scientist, and he discovered before people really like wanted to say, yeah, you're right. He discovered that you could use other senses than eyesight to see, and he
Yeah.
tested it out on
Wow.
blind people, and like a ball would be rolling, and the blind person reached out and grabbed it
Yep.
exactly where it was.
Yeah.
So I just wonder if that has anything to do with, Matthew, like that his ears or maybe even his sense of feel. I don't know. It's
I have
kind of
no
an
doubt.
interesting idea.
Yeah. He has an extrasensory sense about him, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, so, um, well, it's funny. I can see how you would be really a good sports person too. But I mean, as you said, the way that that goes, as far as interviews go, I can see how that would be just kind of settling into the same.
You can
And
only go
yeah,
so far. Like to
yeah,
me, I know that there's a lot of people that love that genre and sports radio is big, but I really feel like you can only go so far. And I try to listen to it um even recently with my son and I just hit that wall where it's like I can't do it.
yeah,
It's just kind of a lot of it kind of becomes the same thing. And I'm still a sports fan. I detoxed for a while and got
yeah.
back into it because of my son. And of course, we love the whole Chiefs thing here and the Super Bowl, and it's fun. And I think the reason why I love it so much as I've gotten older is because it's such a unifier. There's a level of it that's jazz
Yeah.
like. Where there's not political lines, there's just this love, and everybody comes together for one common purpose. And it's like, let's just celebrate the good. Let's just have a good time.
Yeah.
You know, that's it.
Yeah.
Yes, I love it.
Do you ever come out to LA?
I have. I've been out there a few times. Um, I have not been out there lately. The last time I was out on the West Coast, I went down to San Diego. I went to a like this Hallmark wedding in Pine, Colorado, and we drove from there down to San Diego. So, um, but I love it out there. It's a different world.
Yeah. Um, Kansas City. I was trying to think of the sax player that I know. Let me see if I can find him. I'm sure. Oh, Matt Otto. Do you know Matt Otto?
Oh my God, Matt Otto. Matt Otto, there was a moment with Matt. Um, uh, oh, it's leaving me now. There's a great there's a great musician. A lot of musicians come from Kansas City and they'll go to the big cities like New York. Dave Scott came back to town and was playing a show in like 2018, and Matt was a part of it, and they were playing some Coltrane song or something, and Matt hit it so hard and was into it. I could just feel the whole room going, "Oh, holy shit, what's going on?" Like he was channeling some like Matt's amazing. And I've interviewed him like 3 or 4 times on the show. He is beloved and he is so good and he's a wonderful human being, but his
Yeah,
music is transcendent. Yeah,
it is. Yeah. He was in the whole modern um movement in LA, and
yeah,
then he moved to Kansas City. And yeah, yeah, there's um yeah, that just the modern, I guess you could call it just modern jazz movement. It's even within that genre, there's these kind of genres too, right?
yeah,
And yeah, Matt, that well, that's kind of the creative music thing that I was talking about with Rocco.
yeah.
It's improvised music, creative music, even though there may be songs that they're playing,
Yeah.
it has another feeling to it, and it kind of opens a different door.
Certainly does.
Yeah.
Certainly does.
We're gonna have our club, the Blue Whale, come back.
Oh,
And
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be in a different area. It's gonna be in Atwater, which is a, actually a little bit like Altadena,
Yeah.
filled with the and kind of younger people have moved in over the last 20 years, regentrify. Anyway, we did a walkthrough about, it's kind of like a sound stage.
Wow.
So it has this a really big room for the main jazz. Then it has a nice size room for uh, world music or classical. And then he has another good size room for a restaurant.
Yeah.
So this is way different from the original Blue Whale, which was
Yeah.
one room that kind of opened up a little bit to the bar area, but not, maybe held, I think, did it hold 200 people squished in,
Yeah.
you know?
Sure.
And so anyway, June has been living back in Korea for a number of years, since the pandemic and stuff. And he's ready to come back,
Yeah.
and it just cracks me up. He was my student actually,
Oh, cool. Very
and
cool.
many years ago, 25 years ago or so.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's going to be great. And also the Blue Note is moving to LA.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this year should be an interesting year, which also, as I was telling you about this Rocco thing, this Angel City Jazz Festival, you know,
Yeah.
I see opportunities to kind of, you know, combine with the public's awareness.
Sure.
Yeah, there's no reason why LA can't be thought of as a jazz town. We have an
Totally.
embarrassment of riches here, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
I totally agree. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, Joe, what can we create together? I want to create something with you. We both have, such positive, fulfilling ideas.
Let me think about it. Once I get the idea and the hamster starts running around my brain, it'll
Yeah.
start spitting out little ideas. The fortune will come out of the machine. But yeah, that would be wonderful. The one thing I did do, it's been a pipe dream of mine for a long time. I just wrote my first I got my first book published. I have a book of poetry that came out. And
Oh,
that's been pretty fun.
what is the name of it? I'm gonna
The
write it
name of it
down.
is The American Enigma is You. And it's been something that I've wanted to do for a long time. And I finally, a local jazz musician, Kevin Rabus, he was the poet laureate of Kansas for about 3 years. He's a wonderful musician, writer. He heads the creative writing program, English department over at Emporia State University in Kansas.
Yes.
And I kind of reached out. We've been talking a little bit about it, and we collaborate too. He writes for Jam Magazine in Kansas City, and he kind of tipped me off to Spartan Press, and Spartan Press published it, and it's been wonderful. Um, so I'm thinking, yeah, we should collaborate for sure. Yeah, I'll get the wheels going.
Yeah, yeah, I like that.
It would be fun.
Yeah. So, I feel like looking ahead instead of looking behind so much for you, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Terry. Terry Bond, PR person. She actually put a link to your book,
Oh, cool. Excellent.
which
Excellent.
I'm just going to follow so I can just be there too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, look at that. Okay, I'm going to show the humans watching.
Yes.
There it
Here we
is, and
go.
it's only $13
That's it. Yes. Absolutely.
from Barnes and Noble, which is
Barnes and Noble. Yep.
refreshing.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. It's
Cool.
pretty exciting. Yeah, it came out on the 28th of October, so I've been kind of promoting and getting into that. And poetry has always been an outlet for me. Been kind of maybe my, I don't know, like the lyrical side of possibly songwriting, because they tend to be poetic, but it's always been therapeutic. I always feel like writing poetry has just been a really good therapeutic avenue, and it's fun. Kind of bleeds into everything that I'm doing with visual arts and the radio and all of those things. It's like all of the creative endeavors come together for the
Yeah.
greater good. So,
Would you consider reading us a poem?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I have in fact, I have a really good one here that is, there was um, let me find it here. There was a gentleman that goes down to the Blue Room, and he's an older fella, and he goes down with his wife, and he always listens to the jazz. Let's see. I'm trying to pull it up here. He listens to the jazz with his wife, and I absolutely love it. Every time I see him, it just warms my heart. And there's a poem, and let me find it here. Let's see.
Taylor, this question that you asked last that's a hard question. I'm going to think about it though. That's a really challenging question, buddy, but I'm going to think about it. Taylor has really good questions.
Good. I love them. Oh, okay, here we go. Here we go. This is the one. I will go ahead and read it to you. Um, and this is called There's a Little Old Man. There's a little old man that sits slumped over so far he's almost at a 50-degree bend when I go to the Jazz at Noon series off historic 18th and Vine, while his wife sits next to him, holding his hand, and I feel the history and lots of jazz flowing through them both. And it's the most quintessential beautiful thing I think I could ever witness in a paltry populated crowd as the band swings and his head moves ever slightly to all of the thick memories that made him feel just right here on this planet of ours.
Great.
And yeah, and a lot of people know that it's kind of a they're a storied couple that have gone and they've really watched a lot of jazz. So it's so yeah, that gives you kind of a taste. And there's a lot of different jazz vignettes that are in this book too, jazz centric kind of poetry. So it's fun.
Yeah, that's very, very visual. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
really brings you right there.
yeah.
It's amazing. Kind of reminds me, the vision, I mean, I think art is capable of doing that, as an artist. If you're like, this is another thing I tell my students. I'm, when I sing, I'm talking to myself.
Yeah, yeah,
And I mean, I'm also talking to whomever the song is directed toward. You're so late getting home from the office, but I'm really talking to myself, and I'm feeling those feelings, and that way the audience really taps in more to their own pictures,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
because it's an experience that's so personal that it stimulates their own personal pictures.
yeah, totally.
So, but also, the last time I saw Anthony Wilson play, he was playing music from his new project, and gorgeous band, Josh Nelson on piano, and Jay Bellarosa on drums, and the bass player who I'm enamored with now, whose name I can't quite remember, and Miguel Atwood Ferguson on violin. And Anthony was playing and singing, and these songs that he has developed over the last 15 years are stem from a desire to connect and find out more on the history of his father, Gerald Wilson,
Sure.
in Mississippi. So he's really gone to a big extent to travel to Mississippi and talk to people and find out and to create out of that. And so anyway, every song was like a movie,
Yeah,
a little movie. I
yeah.
saw the whole thing.
That's wonderful.
It was really quite effective for me.
Yeah, that's
Right.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
very cool.
that's your poem reminded me of that. It's like,
Thank you.
yeah, it was really beautiful. Um,
Thank you.
so, um, do you want to hear the question that Taylor
Sure. Yeah,
had that I wrote down because I have to think about it?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
not off the top of your head answer. I'm sure you both can answer this with all kinds of answers, but what is music lacking as far as representation in the industry, or even just when it comes to showcasing all kinds of inclusivity?
This is my gut reaction to that. The music industry historically has been one that has been contentious for musicians because they don't get what they deserve. And there's this split between business and creativity. And until we recognize that chasm, we're not going to have the level of inclusivity and the feeling that we want that's going to give musicians the exposure in different genres what they're due. It's a little bit like government. There's got to be a representation of the people. There's got to be a direct link that makes us all feel like we're welcome. And it's got to be done in the right way. It's like all the Pat Martino quotes that you were just reading there.
Yeah,
If it
yeah,
doesn't embody the truth and justice that goes through all of those quotes, then we're going to miss the mark. We're not going to get where we want to go. But in
yeah,
very small ways, in this genre that we're in, with jazz specifically, the community has found a way to get around all of that and embody that. But how does it get out to everybody else? That's the thing.
yeah,
That kind of scratches the surface, so to speak.
yeah. Hmm. Yeah, definitely a broad answer.
Yeah.
Um, so, what do you do with your time these days? What does your life look like?
It's pretty busy. I'm a pretty active family guy. I got a day job. I try to keep up with writing. That's kind of a therapeutic avenue. paint when I can. I do my interviews. I do one show a week. Probably do interviews between oh 5 to 20 a week, somewhere along those lines. So, yeah, I just stay pretty active, I kind of oscillate between the different creative avenues that kind of, generates the whole. Um, I love taking pictures. I love photography. It's always been a love of mine, been a part of the mix. So I just stay busy, try
Is
to
this
get
your
out.
painting in the background?
Yeah, that's one of my originals. So I have shows in town, so I'm still pretty active and do things. I'm a part of the Folly is a big venue here in Kansas City. I'll donate artwork to be a part of auctions to benefit the Folly. So yeah, just getting out there and
What is the folly?
the Folly is a theater. It's been around for a long,
Oh,
long time in
yeah.
downtown Kansas City, and
Uh-huh.
they have a jazz series, and then they have different musicians that come through of, pop and folk and all of that, and it's a really, really historic, great venue.
That's cool. That's something that I would
Yeah.
like to do. Although I know it's
Yeah.
kind of beyond my pay grade, you know. And so I think
Yeah.
that's why I create series at other venues, because they can handle all
Yeah.
the venue
Absolutely.
stuff and I can handle all the series stuff. That I can do.
Yeah.
Taylor says if you both haven't read Malcolm
Yeah.
Gladwell's The Tipping Point or Revenge of the Tipping Point, something that Gladwell has hinted to me is how much there's a difference between representation or even just using a set number of hours to complete something which then gets recognition. He gives the example of the Beatles and how they were constantly writing songs until they finally got recognition for what they were doing. More or
Yeah.
less referring to the 10,000 hour rule, but he treats it like it's more
Exactly.
about work compared to talent, I suppose.
I love Malcolm. I'll have to pick that up. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a book that I have that I was referred to by somebody here too. It's called The Talent Code. It's interesting. It talks
Yeah.
about, do you know
Yeah.
it? Do you know that
I've
book?
heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Talks,
I've heard of it before. Yeah.
it's kind of a little bit about like that. It's what kind of focus do you need to learn?
Yeah.
It's not just like you have a big piece of music and you just go over it and over it and over it. No, you take little pieces of it and you master the little pieces, especially
Yeah.
if there's a problem with it. You go over it. What a great
Yeah.
lesson in life, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Gosh, we already talked about a lot of the lessons that we feel like jazz teaches. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't know if I told you this, I probably did. I wrote a little book during the pandemic called The Act of Being. And because over the years I had been collecting these ideas that a lesson of life applies, like the lesson that I am thinking about applies to singing jazz and it applies to voice technique, three
Yes.
areas which I know about. So, but I also realized they apply to everything.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
just those particular areas, but that's what I wrote about. And
Yeah.
yeah, so, but I'm sure that we're on the same page as all of that.
Yeah. Totally. Absolutely.
Is there,
Absolutely.
is there something I have not brought up about you that you think is noteworthy?
No, I think we've hit it pretty good. I think we've gotten into it pretty well. Yeah. Yeah. It's great to be on your show. It's been yeah, and the questions have been wonderful.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at my list, that I sometimes go back to, but how about a bucket list? Do you have a bucket list?
I don't, not at this point. I mean, I'm starting to feel my mortality more being 52, but I try to just kind of keep my spirit as young as I can. I definitely would like to get out to more cities to see shows, New York, the big venues. Um, there's a lot of places that I would love to visit along those lines, but I don't know. I kind of, again, I take the page out of the jazz playbook. I just kind of go with improv. I tend to have a pretty big thirst for life, so I'm always ready to go, you know.
What do you think, especially how old are your
And the
kids?
bucket list,
How old are your
um,
kids?
they're 19 and 20.
Okay. Well, they're a little past kind of
19 and 20.
directing, um, where you would like them to look. But what about social media? How do you feel about social media, and which includes younger people coming up, heavily connected to social media, with all the talk about young people's attention spans, being minute because of social media, and using social media to promote with, and I don't know, what do you think about social media?
I think it has its place. I think it's great for promotion, and I know for me, I find a lot out, and it's a good way for me to get things out. But for the young minds, I think it can be too much, especially the young female minds. I know with my stepdaughter, it was really, really hard to just see all of the images and see everything that everybody was doing and presenting this life that's not genuine. It's, full of just what people want you to see. I think there's a danger to it. But I also think that when we're talking about, like, especially in the world of jazz and promotion and young musicians, I think it's absolutely invaluable. And it's the new way of getting things out there. Like with what we're doing with podcasting, it's
Yeah.
the new marketing, it's the new way, and this all feeds into social media. So I think there's a lot of avenues that can be positive. But like with anything else with human beings, you just have to temper it and do it for the right reasons. If your heart's in the right place and you're doing it and you're presenting things in the right way, I think it's great. But if it's disingenuous and frivolous and showing things in a fake plasticity, it's not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. I feel like, I'd have to dig around to actually find out more questions that I want to ask you. And one reason is because you've already answered
Yeah.
a lot of the stuff. And so I'm going to end off. And I want to thank you so much for being a part of this, on this end.
Yeah.
And it's been really, of course, enjoyable to talk with you.
It's been wonderful. Thank you for inviting me. I've loved it. And we'll think about collaborating. We'll get the ideas going. We'll keep this continuing.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you so much. Take care.
You can leave. I'm going to chat a little to the general public.
Okay. Sounds wonderful. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too, Joe. Bye. What a cool guy, huh? Love him. Just wanted to tell you a few things. Let's see. For those of you in LA, Aviva Diamond is performing at the Alvis Showroom in San Pedro on Sunday, 4 to 6. Chris Wabich is at Sam First on Friday night. So next week on this show, I have Monday from 12 to 2. This 11 o'clock was a different time that Joe had to do. But 12 to 2 next week is a great pianist named Louis Dura. He lived in LA for a long time and about 12 years ago moved to Berlin. And he's very creative. He's a really nice guy. His playing has covered a lot of different areas. He played for Mark Winkler's Broadway shows. He was the musical director for those. He made his own records, which included these beautiful trio, different kinds of versions of pop music, and played for people like me. And he's also very interested in student singers, especially scat, which is pretty cool. like an overabundance of interest from a musician. And as a matter of fact, he's coming here to LA in February, and February 22nd and 23rd, we're having a 12-hour workshop for scat. I just did one last weekend that was kind of in expectation of that. I did it for 5 hours on one day. And even though it was a long time, I really felt it, the 5 hours brought it to the point that I had hoped. It ran through these certain ideas that you need to know how to scat enough so that people left actually having that a part of them. But 2 days of that is going to be really intense. So it's going to be great. If you want, you can email me or look on my website for more information about that. But anyway, Louis Dura is going to be on Monday, the 3rd. And I'm sneaking back into two interviews a week. And so normally Mondays and Fridays I'm doing. Next Friday, the 7th, a new favorite singer of mine, kind of a soulful jazz singer, like kind of R&B-ish soul jazz from New York, named Emily Braden. Tanya, you probably know, right? So anyway, she's going to be on Friday, Emily Braden. And for those of you in LA, I'll just stop with this. Saturday next week, the 8th, I will be performing in Pasadena. And I'll be performing with my cohort, Gary Fukushima, who's one of the best piano players I've played with. And it's a show that the guitarist, composer, singer, Jason Luckett puts on the second Saturdays of every month. So this is a jazz show. And the other group, I guess Jason is going to be singing jazz too, but the other group consists of my dear friends, Cheryl Barnes, great singer, and her husband, Phil Cabasso, who's a great pianist. So they're also going to be on the show as well. So we'll both probably do about 30 or 40 minutes. So that's Saturday, February 8th in Pasadena, also on my list. Oh, Terry, hi. Yeah, the 1881, that's coming up. That whole series that Judy Wexler has started. The 1881 is kind of a funky little bar in Pasadena. And Wednesdays and Fridays especially is good for modern jazz. Jimmy Bramley usually Wednesdays, or he books whomever, and Fridays is Joel Taylor, who actually lost his home in the fires, but he's still doing that. And actually the owner of, I don't know if you know this, Terry, but the owner of 1881 lost her house. So there was a question of whether she was going to reopen, but I'm glad she did for a number of reasons, but especially for her, so that she has this, something to work on and do and create. So that's what's happening for the next week or so. And all of the things that Joe said today just spoke to me so well, so beautifully. And it's just lovely. It's great. And I hope all of you have beautiful moments in this week. And I'm going to have beautiful moments in this week. And some of them it's going to be great jazz. And like that. For those of you who know Dan Davila, our friend who's in a kind of a rehab place, tomorrow I'm going to go play for him in the rehab place with the great guitar player Zap Kaplinger. So I'm looking forward to that. Everybody, thanks for joining in.